again. I'm Tracy Limo. I've been a museum educator with Historic Newton for about 4 years. The reason that I call this tour Voices of Newtonville is that I tried to incorporate a number of quotes and stories directly from our archival collection. So it's not going to be just me talking. You'll notice I have some things I'm going to be reading. I'm not just reading my own script. I'm going to be reading some quotes from people who lived in Newtonville. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times what happens in history is we kind of lose the voices of the daily and day-to-day people. We end up really only hearing about the rich and the famous and the powerful. And so this tour is kind of an effort to get a little bit of that day-to-day personhood back. And I know a lot of you may be from Newtonville or definitely from Newton, so feel free to add your own voices to the mix. I mean, I certainly don't know everything. I've only done a bit of research, so you are the people who actually live here, and if you have anything to add, please feel free to do so. So we're going to get started by heading down this way over towards the athletic fields of the high school, which have a lot of history. All right, so you can follow me that way. So our first stop here are the athletic fields of the high school. Now, these athletic fields actually have a lot of history. So back in the 600s, this area was all farmland. Judge Abraham Fuller was a very important Revolutionary Era War citizen of Newton, and he had a large farm right here. He was town selectman, he worked as part of the state legislature, and he was actually a representative to the Constitutional Convention. When General William Hull married his daughter, Sarah Fuller, he inherited this farm, and it became Hull Farm. So still, one of the grandest farms in the area. Now, William Hull actually served with credit in the Revolutionary War, but he also served in the War of 1812. Unfortunately, he was governor of the Michigan Territory, and he had to surrender his fort to the British. So when he did so, he was court-martialed and condemned to be shot. Now, because he had done so well in the Revolutionary War, the president pardoned him. Definitely done with the military, he came home and spent the rest of his days farming. The house that was originally standing here, and this is a picture of William Hull. The house that was originally standing here was built in 1680. It was added to by Judge Fuller in 1766, and then finally enlarged further by William Hull. Now, and after that time, it was called Hull Manor. During most of the first half of the 19th century, Newton remained an agricultural community and was primarily known as being the site of Hull Farm. So some things people had to say about General William Hull. He was said to have manners that were mingling of those of the soldier, the courtier, and a man of the world. He was a scientific and successful farmer. Now, his wife had a hobby of buying things at auctions, and as a result, the mansion was practically a museum of remarkable objects like church windows, coffin plates. It was always full from attic to cellar. The Hull mansion was also home to an enslaved man named Othello, called Tillo for short. A neighbor said his father had given him as a boy to Mrs. Hull until he should become of age. But when General Hull set him at liberty and gave him money to start, he went as far as Watertown and then returned to the house, considering himself one of the family, and he always remained with them. Now, this sounds a little bit simplistic, probably not the full story. Unfortunately, we don't have the voice of Othello himself, so we'll really never know what he truly was thinking about the Hulls. But it probably was not necessarily that they were just the best. More likely that he didn't have a lot of other options open to him. But unfortunately, we haven't to really hear his voice on the matter. Now, as William Hull, he wrote his memoir and had 2 publications attempting to defend his actions in the War of 1812 to salvage his name. The 1824 called Memoirs of the Campaign of the Northwestern Army in the United States seemed to do just that, and he was actually honored with a dinner a few months before he died in 1825. So he was eventually able to kind of get his reputation back. Now, in 1846, Mr. John Roberts, liking the mansion, which looked like this, and owning a property up on Walnut and Austin Streets, decided to have the mansion moved to that site. In 1886, this house became the first site of the Newton Club when it was newly formed, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. And it was eventually demolished in 1895, so unfortunately this house no longer stands. But the land of the original site here, these athletic fields, were sold in 1854 to a man named William Claflin, where he built a larger and more modern mansion that was dubbed the Old Elms, after the huge trees that would have been surrounding it in this field. So the mansion's, but Claflin's house does still stand. It's actually just up the street there, so we're going to continue on a little bit of a ways and go see the house that was part of the Old Elms. So this, if you turn around, this is the original house. This is the house that used to stand right in the middle of the athletic fields, Claflin's estate. Now, it looked a little bit different then when it was under the Old Elms. Built in 1855, this house once served as the summer home of William Claflin. Claflin made a fortune in the wholesale boot and shoe industry, and he started his political career in Hopkinton in 1848 as a member of the General Court. He was elected on the Free Soil ticket, which argued that any territory that was going to be considered for statehood should not allow slavery. In 1859, he was elected to the Senate and was made president of the General Court in 1861. Now, as part of the Free Soil Party, he attended the Republican National Convention and actually participated in the nomination of Abraham Lincoln for president. He was actually, after he goes through the process of helping to nominate Lincoln, he becomes the 23rd Massachusetts governor in 1869. And he was the first Massachusetts governor to give unequivocal support for women's suffrage, and he does a lot to work on the abolitionist movement. He made that a high priority. He also served on the boards of Wellesley College and Boston University, and in 1869, he helped Newton resident Dr. Eben Torgey found the New England Conservatory of Music. So he was really very involved in the community. Now coming to this, the Old Elms. Now, the Elms originally stood in the middle of the present athletic fields. It would have been a 24-acre estate, and there were large elm trees, gardens, ponds, and numerous outbuildings. So it was really quite a sight to behold. His wife, Mary, actually wrote 4 volumes of personal reminiscences called Under the Old Elms. Now, many of the Newtonville residents noted it as a social hub, and at the turn of the century, it served as a place for garden parties, charity bazaars, and a number of fundraisers. One Newtonville resident towards the end of her years in 1821 had this to say about the Old Elms. Ex-Governor Claflin's coming to Newtonville in 1854 after building a fine mansion on the General Hull estate added much to our social life. Many will recall the delightful gatherings in that home where one was privileged in meeting many distinguished people. Among them our beloved poet Whittier, Longfellow, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Sitting Bull, Oliver Wendell Holmes, and many others too numerous to mention. The gracious hostess, Mrs. Claflin, did not forget those who were not so prominent nor fortunate, and gave to the poor children and their tired mothers from Boston many a delightful day in the country during her summers in Newtonville. It was a sad day for us who remembered this when that fine mansion was moved from the site so well suited to its dignified and large proportions under the Old Elms to a location behind the new school. Now, the house altered somewhat after it moved to its new site on Elm Street, as you can see, in the early 1900s after Claflin's death, and was adapted for multi-family use. Though, as you can see, it hasn't changed much since that time. Now, once the Claflin estate had been relocated from the Old Elms, that land became home to Newton High School. So we're actually going to head back towards the front of the building to talk a little bit about Newton High School. This is what Newton High School looked like in 1859. Now, up until this time, Newtonville had been pretty slow to develop. Newton really in general had been pretty slow to develop. But once we get Newton High School, after 10 years of debate, this is decided as a good central location for Newton High School, and things start to pick up here. So this school is built in 1859. People start flocking to the village to send their kids to this school, and by the Civil War era, it's firmly established. The school was built on just a small corner of the Claflin estate, as I mentioned back there. It was a 3-story wooden sculpture. The first class had 75 students, and it was taught with 2 teachers and under Principal Beale. So if you think class sizes are big today, think about that. A drill shed was also added in 1891 and used as a gymnasium for graduations and for other large assemblies. One young student, William Jackson Tull, relates his impression of the new school in 1859. Friday, October 21st, 1859. Many events have taken place since I last wrote in my journal. As we were not obliged to write in it the last part of term, I left off because I grew tired of it. the Newton High School has been built and organized, 2 new teachers inaugurated, and things gone on very well for a new school. It took about 4 weeks to get thoroughly organized because in a school like this, there is necessarily a great amount of labor to get the scholars classified. We have 1 session all the time, and school begins at 9 o'clock and ends at 2 o'clock. Some like the teachers and others do not. I cannot say I like the principal. It seems to me he does nothing but talk, and it takes him ever so long to get to the subject that he's going to speak on. I.M. Beals is the name of the principal, and Miss Breck is the name of the assistant. So he's not too happy with teachers, but he thinks the school is going pretty well, right? Now, after the Civil War, enrollment increases dramatically, creating the need for a new building. So in 1891, the original building is torn down, and the Newton Classical High School replaces it in 1898. The Technical High School, shown here, was added in 1909 to accommodate the diverse curriculum offerings, consisting of the general course, which covered basic math, literature, and science. We had the classical course, which was meant to prepare students for any American college. There was the scientific course, which was meant to prepare students for MIT or another scientific institution like that. And finally, the business course for any students seeking general preparations to go into business. So, after Claflin's death in 1905, a committee forms with its members contributing about $100 each so that the town can actually purchase all of the land along Elm Road as far as Lowell Avenue to use it as the school athletic fields, as it is now. The fields are used for a number of different sports, but especially baseball and football are very popular. So even before the extra land was purchased, Newton High School is making do with what available space they have to have home games in these 2 sports. Here we can see a baseball ticket, a football ticket, and a football schedule from 1906. Let's see, what's the other date there? And 1907, right? And we have one Brookline High versus Newton High. So age-old rivals, right? Yeah. So, and I can pass these pictures around if people are interested in seeing those. So, now the entire school building complex was demolished in 1973 when the Newton North High School was completed. And at that point, the main entrance returned to Walnut Street, as was originally the case in 1859. So what happened when they built the 2 new schools? So originally we had 1859, the front entrance is facing out that way towards Walnut Street. When we build the classical and the technical schools, now we're over on this side because we have all that new land. The athletic fields are back here. And then when we build Newton North High School, it switches again. We've got our front entrance back on Walnut Street as it was originally. So now with the creation and the growth of the high school, it contributed considerably to the popularity of Newtonville as a place to live. It was not the only factor to do so, though. The other big thing that really helped Newton to come together as a city, as opposed, as I was just explaining to someone on the walk up, as opposed to this collection of small villages, was the Newton Club. So we're going to be heading up to the site of the old Newton Club, which is actually the senior center just up the road. So this was the site of the Newton Club. Now, currently the site, as you can see, is owned by the Newton Senior Center. Before that, it was the Free Branch Library. And before that, the first building reside here was the Newton Club. Now, the Newton Club was founded in 1887, but as I mentioned earlier, Hull Mansion was actually the first site of the Newton Center when it was moved up there to the corner of Walnut and Austin Streets. The Newton Club was founded in 1887 to promote a greater sense of community spirit, even though membership was restricted to men. So Newtonville was chosen as the ideal home for the club because of its accessible and central location. Again, very similar to the reason it was chosen as the site of Newton's first high school. At the time, Newton didn't stretch quite as far south, and this was really considered a very central location that all of the villages could have easy access to. Now the club was started by Samuel L. Powers and William J. Follett, and it grew to about 400 members. Its first home didn't have too much space available, but when this site opened in 1892, it provided a library, a reading room, dining rooms, cafes, a billiard room, an assembly hall, and apartments for visiting ladies. So, the Newton Club was open to members every day, and the bylaws list only 2 rules for the clubhouse. No game of any kind shall be played in the clubhouse on a Sunday, and no gambling shall be allowed in the club. So pretty much everything else goes. Our friend William Claflin actually was a member of the Newton Club and attended its very first meeting. It did have some classes available to youths, and it was kind of unofficially the political area or the place where political meetings would be decided. It was written that all the mayors were decided here at the Newton Club. So again, all these prominent, wealthy men are making the decisions here at this club when they're hanging out. And another thing in regard to community, as I was going to continue on, is that they had a number of concert series and dance halls. Here we see a ticket to a concert here in 1898, a promenade concert, and also a program for the first June concert. They actually had a whole June concert series. Now they also had things like billiards, pool, bowling, golf, cotillion dances, which you could attend for $1, dancing lessons for youths, and weekly concert series. Now on the back of this program, and again I will try to pass this around for everyone to see, we could see that they actually also had a fair amount of food available to people. Ice creams, lemonades, chicken and lobster salads would be sold at all events as refreshments, and clearly at much cheaper prices than you would see today. Now they also produced a publication called The Fairy Queen, which is this guy, and it contained stories, poems, fashion advice, cartoons, weather reports, advertisements for members, promotion of upcoming club events. One of the weather reports, maybe a little biased, reads, October 17th is expected to be a grand sunny day. A cold day, however, may be anticipated for those who fail to attend the Newton Club Fete. Now the club also provided jobs for those who were not so wealthy to become members. So again, we're really taking in the rich and the powerful, so there is a bit of segregation. I don't know what the exact qualifications were to be a member, but at the very least there were some people who couldn't afford to be. So a man named William Halliday actually worked here, and he writes, the 2 bowling alleys in the basement were a source of employment as we got into our teens. Pins were set manually. The pay for pin boys was a nickel per string. It took a lot of energy and agility, but it was fun jumping in and out of the 2 pits. The faster you were, the better the pay and the tips. Many poor boys of this city who helped their families by working at the Newton Club as pin boys in the bowling alleys and in other capacities were given employment by wealthy members in the club and started in successful careers. So, that's about it for the Newton Club. Now we are going to head on to another very important factor in uniting Newton and its villages into one big city, and that is the railroad station up on Bower Street. So we're going to head up to the Methodist Church there and make a quick right. We're here in front of the Pike, but basically the Boston-Worcester Railroad line starts in 34, and all along that route residential pockets start to spring up, including of course in Newton and Newtonville. The company's investor had actually originally wanted to route the railroad through the towns of Waltham and Watertown, but those communities rejected the proposal. Luckily, Newton, being rural and very agricultural at the time, was eager to get the influx of residents and the money that the railroad would bring. So William Jackson of the Homestead was instrumental in securing the rights to run the railroad through Newton, through his town. Now, the railroad entrepreneurs had actually initially wanted to build the trains to transport freight, but they quickly realized the potential for a commuter market being so close to Boston. So the Eastern Railroad, which operated between East Boston and Newburyport, introduced the first season of commuter tickets in 1839. The Boston-Worcester Railroad started offering commuted fares, which is actually the term where the term commuter comes from, those reduced rates for the people going to and from Boston so very often. The Newtonville station, looks like this, was built in 1880 and it was called Hull's Crossing. Again, William Hull still kicking around. The limit was 8 passengers to a train, and the fare from Newtonville to Boston was 37.5 cents. I certainly love if that was the case today. And this attracted many neighboring cities to Newtonville, people from neighboring cities to Newtonville to come here, to get on the train, to commute into Boston. And a lot of homes started springing up all along Walnut Street. There's actually only one house still remaining from before the Pike went in along Walnut Street. We're not going to get a chance to stop there today, but if you go all the way to the end of, Austin Street, you go all the way to the end of Austin Street, you'll see a small little house that has 2 doors on it, and that's right at the corner by Lowell Ave. It's the only one that's still standing from before the Pike. But anyway, so the station was built in the Victorian style, and it was the only suburban stopping point for all of the principal New York and Western Express trains. So it becomes a very popular station. The railroad tracks were depressed in 1896. Covered stairways then linked the brick depot with the waiting platform, which was 15 feet below. Again, our friend William Halliday, who worked with the Newton Club, recalls this about growing up in the 20th century and using the station. It was big and had 2 levels. The station served 4 tracks. The south side 2 tracks were for commuter trains. The station itself was confined to the south side. We used to stand on the platform and watch the swells board and debark those grand, mysterious parlor cars, coaches, and sleepers with romantic names like Hiawatha, Minnetonka, and Dixie Dreams, daring to think that someday we too would be looking out with disdain at small boys as we took a spot in the club car, coach, or sleeper, or diner, heading for faraway places with strange-sounding names. Amazingly, this sport continued well into the dating period, just sitting on a station bench with your girl and watching the outbound evening trains to the west. My first memory of the railroad station is that of the day in winter of 1919 when the 26th Yankee Division paraded in Boston after returning from victory in the war to end all wars. We waited in the warm Newtonville station for the train to take us into town, and while we were waiting, there was a kid about my age with a toy tank. He would push it several times, then lay it on the floor, where it climbed up over his father's newspaper. His mother said, "Thank God you will never know what a real tank is." I thought of that kid many times in the future years, especially when I entered the federal military service as a gunner corporal some 20 years later. This time it was different, to make the world safe for democracy. Now, in 1962, with the construction of the Mass Pike, Newtonville loses many of the working class houses. As I mentioned, so many houses on Austin Street were torn down, and it loses its beloved railroad station. There's an article of a newspaper where Newton's 6th grader, Donald Matheson of the Claflin School, which you're going to go visit later and you'll recognize the name, he wrote about its demolition. And he says, "The station stood there strong and proud and regal through almost a century of wear and tear. It had seen steam rise till its fullest height and fall until not another steam engine passed and re-blackened its walls with smoke. Then one day terror struck. The toll road had to go through. The tracks which had brought countless trains by it were torn up. The houses around it were smashed to splinters. The big crane which had done damage to the houses left, but only for a while. The old station sitting there peacefully watched these strange happenings, somehow sensing but not really quite knowing that it would be the next victim of that terrible crane. One day came and the station master left. The crane rolled over to it and took a bite of the southeast corner, and another and another. That night around 7 o'clock, a fire started in the cellar. Now there was 3/4 of a station left, coated with soot inside and out. The next day was the end. The station was torn down along with the memories and the Who Loves Who written all over the walls." So that was it for the railroad station, but of course the Mass Pike comes running through. Again, it kind of divides up Newtonville at this point, right? So we have the bridge arching over, and before the Mass Pike came through, much of the commercial center of Newtonville was actually what we would consider now north of this bridge. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. First, we're going to go over to the other side of this building and talk a little bit about the Methodist Church that stands here. So anyway, this is the old brick Methodist Church. It had originally been built by a Presbyterian group in 1868, but it was sold to the Methodists soon after. In 1896, a tower was added, bringing it up to its current height, and it held the village clock. It was made of red brick, and the granite facade was not actually added until 1926. Our friend William Halliday again remembers, in 1918, the church tower had a huge picture of Kaiser Wilhelm's face with a thermometer over the top, which marked the progress of Newtonville's Liberty Loan Drive. I was with my parents the day it went over the top and people threw tomatoes at it. So in addition to this unique purpose, the church also served as a second meeting place to the Masons. Originally, the Masons met in a small Swedenborgian church just down a ways. Unfortunately, we won't have time to visit that today. So it becomes the first home of the Masons, and as such, Mason Louis Binney in 1907 tells us that this is what it looked like on the inside. This room, the first to be called the Masonic Hall, was plainly furnished with a woolen carpet and common settees, having a large stove in one corner, which made its vicinity uncomfortably hot, while the opposite end of the room was equally uncomfortably cold. and there were no facilities for banquets or special occasions, and its proximity to the roof made the heat intolerable in the warmer months. So the Masons move out in 1896. The Methodists, on the other hand, don't end up leaving until 1980, so for a time they're sharing the space. Now in 1992, the clock tower was crumbling and it was deemed a threat to public safety. So despite the protests of the Newton Historical Commission, the tower was removed and it was capped with this ornamental roof, as it is termed. And you can see up there it actually has like a number of radio transistors, satellite connectors, things like that on it. And today I believe it is leased out. At least the last time I gave this tour there were a lot of space for lease signs on here. I don't know if another retail property has taken it up or if anybody knows what's in there now. But as far as I know, it's either empty or having some small offices in there. Moving on to, we're just going to turn our attention over here to the Masonic Hall, the next place that the Masons inhabited. It was designed by Mason and architect William Richardson. It was built in 1895, dedicated to the Masons officially in 1897. The Masons organized in Newton as early as the 1860s, and 26 charter members met in a Bower Street carpenter shop, I'm not sure where, somewhere along this road, and decided that in 1896, Dalhousie Lodge, Jessamine Commandery, and the Newton Royal Arch chapter agreed to erect a Masonic building on the corner lot at Walnut and Newtonville streets. The Masons expected to occupy the second and third floors and then have the first floor rented out for retail space, build a little money. Now the new building would contain an assembly hall and the first Newtonville branch library on the first floor. So even though they intended it to all be retail, the first home of the library, which again eventually moved to the senior center at one point, started out here in this building. Let me flip this over. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, a lot of the events put on by the Masons are sometimes kept pretty secret, but there's a lot of evidence to support that there are many members-only events that go on. So here we have an invitation to the Dalhousie Lodge dinner from 1940. That's this one down here. And we also have a flyer for the Elliott Lodge's first anniversary in 1878. That big one over there. A lot of interesting archival material about the Masons if you ever want to make an appointment with our researcher and stop by. There's some really interesting stuff in there. But one event in particular stands out in the history of the Newtonville Masonic Temple that garnered much public attention. And this one event that garnered much public attention was the Knights Templar Ball. So according to a Newton reporter on February 17, 1911, this evening a Knights Templar Ball was held in the Masonic Temple, all members of the order being in full uniform. There was an attendance of about 400. All of the spacious apartments were brought into requisition. The guests comprised several grand officers. In keeping with the occasion, the ballroom was made especially attractive to the eyes of the Templars. The four walls were partially concealed by bunting festooning their entire distance. High up at the back of the platform was a vivid red Passion Cross banner, and the opposite corner showed a banner of the Commandery. At the extreme end of the room was a large cross and crown resting upon a massive Maltese cross. In the niches of the walls were large bouquets, and at the space to the side of the stage was converted a parlor. Eminent Commander Peterson and Mrs. Peterson led the procession into the ballroom. As they passed into the apartment, Albert E. Billings was drawn up at the entrance with swords presented. There was an order of 14 dances with Thomas W. White, floor director, and members of the escort as aides. So quite the party going on. The ball was held because Sir Frank L. Nagel, a member of the Jessamine Commandery, was going to be made the Grand Commander of Massachusetts and Rhode Island at the triennial meeting of Masons to take place in Colorado in 1913. So in the years prior, the Masons in Newton tried to drum up membership. So they had a lot of these public events so that they could actually go to the triennial Colorado and have a huge mass of members to be there to congratulate him and to honor him. Now, today the upper floors are actually still used for the meetings of four Masonic lodges: Dalhousie Lodge, Garden City Lodge, Norumbega Fraternity Lodge, and the Waltham Triad Lodge, while the lower floors are used for office and retail space as they were always intended. Now, if you want to take a look, we just have to cross the street, but in an alcove to the left of the door is a time capsule with a plaque that was committed in 1896 to be opened in 1996, and so it was. The contents were displayed in the hall, and according to an online notice from the Palestinian Order, which is a female chapter, kind of like a sister organization to the Masons, according to them, they said there were autographs of Civil War generals Grant, McClellan, and Sheridan, vividly colored 1-cent stamps, and an unfaded September 18th, 1896 editions of 3 different Newton newspapers. So the time capsule was opened in 1996. It was recommitted in 2010, and it is scheduled to be reopened again in 2110. So if anybody's around, go check that out. Probably not gonna be here. Tell your grandkids. Ooh, I'm killing the plants. Uh-oh. All right. Now, anyway, so the Masonic halls here, a lot of community or places significant to the community are here. But as I mentioned over by the railroad station, the bulk of the commercial district is actually from about here, from Austin Street on. Now again, our friend William Halliday, he was born in 1913. He was 82 at the time of writing this. He describes the commercial district, which again is kind of from about the Masonic Hall here, stretching up this way. It says Newtonville had 4 A&P stores. It had 2 or 3 First National stores. It had an economy grocery store. It had an economy butter and egg. It had an Ames's butter and egg. It had a Morgan's Creamery butter and egg. People went from store to store. Your mother would give you a shopping list. You bought your butter at one store. If they had eggs on sale, you went to another store. You went to A&P for a pound of coffee. We had tailor shops. We had a haberdashery. You really never would have to leave the village for anything. There were horses used for transportation by the grocery stores, so you could have your order delivered by horse. People shopped on both sides, but there were no stores south of Austin Street. The stores on both sides of Walnut Street as you went towards the high school were built while I was in high school in 1932. So all the shops that are still remaining this way, we're seeing 1930s. Employment in the stores, if any there be, was strictly limited to boys. Girls and young ladies did only waitress work, with very little of that available in the 2 or 3 tea rooms and ice cream parlors, which drifted in and out of business. So that's about it for the commercial district. I'm sure if any of you have anything to add about the commercial district, please feel free to do so. We're going to head to our last stop on the tour now, and that is the Claflin School. You'll recognize the name. Last but not least, we come to the Claflin School. So the red brick building was built in 1889. It was built in front of a small wooden elementary school that was dated from the Civil War era. So this was kind of like a new and improved elementary school for the area. As late as 1871, the school is designated only as number 6 in the directory, but in 1869, when Claflin is nominated as governor of Massachusetts, obviously Claflin becomes a really great guy to put your names on. You'll notice again, if you go around Newton, you'll see Claflin on a number of street signs, and actually outside of Newton as well, governor of Massachusetts, right? So we actually see his name all over. By 1872, there's a record of a teacher training in the Claflin School, and this is the first time the name appears in reference to this building. So the 6-room brick school, it was ready for use in 1891. The original cost was $35,000. If you'll remember what it cost to build Newton North High School, it's quite a difference. Now, in the early 1920s, Newton adopted a plan for a 6-year elementary school, a 3-year junior high school, and a 3-year senior high school. With the building of the F.A. Day Junior High School in 1923, the 7th and 8th grades moved out of this school, but they had originally been here at the Claflin Elementary School. So here we can see the 6th grade class and the 8th grade class. In 1923, that's when they move out the 7th and 8th graders, but it's still not quite big enough, and so they had 2 portable wooden structures that were erected on the sides to support all of the students. So the brick building later becomes part of the Newton Junior College. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It becomes part of junior college called Claflin Hall, and it had a library on the top floor. Now eventually, Newton Junior College closes in 1976, and it turns residential. As you notice, we're actually standing in front of people's houses now in the 1980s. So the elementary school, starting in 1951, it's just too small. So as you pointed out, right, 6 rooms, we have K through 6th. Once we get that small amount of relief with the 7th and 8th graders leaving, it's just too small. It's considered outmoded. So in 1953, they opened the new Claflin School on Lowell Avenue. And the students and the teachers of the old Claflin School here moved over into the new school. The new school was dedicated on Thursday, December 10th, 1953. Now, the school's only opened until about 1981. Charlotte Howard served as the principal for 19 years at the Claflin School, tried to keep the school open, but ultimately failed due to lack of enrollment. There are a lot of other competing schools in the area at this time. So, the students and teachers dispersed mainly to Cabot and Pierce schools, and a scholarship fund was started to commemorate the Claflin School, such that if you're graduating from Newton High School, you could get up to $5,000 scholarship if you had started out in the Claflin School. The last person to graduate and receive one of these scholarships graduated in 1993. So nobody left from the Claflin School today. Now, on May 27th in 1981 at 7:30, the students decided to have a reception to say goodbye to their school and their retiring principal. School was closing. Everyone was forced to move on. Reporter Stephen Burke described the scene. The 5 second and third grade girls from the Claflin Elementary School waited anxiously Wednesday night outside the school gym. The young girls were waiting for their chance. They wanted to honor their principal, Charlotte Howard. First, it was 9-year-old Julie Lane's turn, calling Howard a great principal. She sighed, "We have had fabulous years at this school. This school is wonderful." Then it was 8-year-old Corey Liebergott's turn. She said, "I'm sure we'll be the smartest students at our new schools." Jessica Simon, an 8-year-old third grader at the school, was next to praise Howard. "We wish you could go to Cabot or Pierce with us. Everything you do is great." Jessica Balboni, 8, followed, "We are sad because all of us have been here since kindergarten. We really like this school." And finally, it was second grader Deborah Lifton's turn. "I think you are the best principal there ever was. You help people when they are leaving from their school. You tell them you will still love them even when they're gone, and I wish you happiness through your whole life."
What year was that?
So that was 1981, and so those kids were dispersed mainly to Cabot and Pierce schools. And so on that farewell note, I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to the Voices of Newtonville. Thank you. And again, you guys were asking some really great questions. Clearly there's more research that needs to be done, and I'd encourage you all to, if you're interested, make appointments with our archivist to check out all of the resources, because all of the sources that I used for this mainly came from our archives. There's actually a lot of information about these places in Newtonville, right? So it's pretty neat when you actually get in there and see all the primary sources and the firsthand materials telling us about the people who lived here in the past. And don't forget to write down all of your reminiscences about Newtonville, so then in 100 years we'll have something to talk about, okay? I'm waiting. All right, thank you for coming.